Federally funded projects must consider social, economic, and environmental justice impacts that may occur as a result of the project. These impacts are guided by several federal regulations, including the Civil Rights Act, Executive Order 12898, and the Uniform Act. The Socioeconomics section of the RER addresses impacts to minority, low-income, and linguistically isolated populations that could be affected by a federally funded transportation project. Additionally, consideration should be given to individuals with disabilities, educational resources, employment opportunities, and Indian tribal governments. Specifically, disproportionately highly and adverse impacts to environmental justice populations must be avoided, minimized, or mitigated to satisfy regulations associated with the use of federal funds. As part of the RER process, the LPA must assess any impacts to environmental justice, or EJ, populations, complete public involvement, follow federal regulations, and describe any known issues in the RER. The LPA should review potential impacts to environmental justice populations associated with this project and provide a brief description of any potential impacts in the RER. The EPA's EJ Screen tool, discussed on the next slide, can be used by the LPA to help identify any minority, low-income, or linguistically isolated populations near the project. When completing public involvement, the LPA must indicate any public involvement that has been conducted or is anticipated to be completed that will notify the public about the project. Public involvement appropriate for the project must be completed and documented, including responses to written comments where warranted. The LPA should determine if there is any public controversy about the project. For most projects that qualify for a PCE NEPA classification, public involvement may include, but is not limited to, press releases, advertisements on city or county websites, social media posts, and/or public meetings. Any right-of-way or easement acquisition should follow the Uniform Relocation Act and should not have a disproportionately high impact on environmental justice populations. The LPA should identify environmental resources and anticipated impacts under the Known Concerns section of the RER. EJ Screen is a free public mapping and screening application created by the EPA. This tool contains demographic data that will help identify minority, low-income, and linguistically isolated populations in a given location. LPAs should use this tool to identify any sensitive populations in or around the project area. To access EJ Screen, use the link in the bottom left of this slide and click Launch EJ Screen Tool on the main page. If you need additional guidance on how to properly use this tool, please follow the link on this slide. To explore data and determine if there are any sensitive populations located near a project, use EJ Screen to locate the project area and then use the Add Maps function shown in the slide. Under More Demographics, the LPA can obtain data related to income, language, and minority populations in the vicinity of a project. This slide shows a visual representation of EJ Screen data. The LPA should use this tool to determine if any sensitive populations may be affected by a project. To access additional data, visit the U.S. Census Bureau Quick Facts website and the U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey website. If a project may affect minority or low-income populations, further action may be required to ensure that the affected populations are given adequate consideration and ample opportunity to participate in project development. Contact the environmental specialist for further guidance if you think your project may affect sensitive populations. When evaluating socioeconomic impacts, the LPA should also consider impacts to sensitive populations resulting from road and bridge closures, closure of public transit facilities, detours, and residential or commercial displacements. The LPA must also consider sensitive populations when determining the best method to provide sufficient public notice of travel disruptions. These impacts can disproportionately affect minority and low-income populations. For example, language barriers can affect public notices, and impacts to important resources such as grocery stores, hospitals, and businesses can cause excessive hardships on minority and low-income populations. Public involvement is required for all projects and must be completed prior to NEPA clearance for all RERs. Acceptable public involvement includes a press release, social media post, website post, or a discussion at a city or county meeting. The LPA should provide a brief summary of any public involvement that has occurred, or will occur, in the public hearing, meeting information section of the RER form, as shown in the graphic above. The LPA is responsible for providing the public involvement information, road closure and detour information, number of displacements, and details on access restrictions to bus stops, pedestrian facilities, and commercial and residential dwellings. If the LPA is aware of any sensitive populations located around the project, it should describe this in the RER form. These pieces of information will allow MoDOT to determine any potential issues or roadblocks associated with the project more quickly.